Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about Saturn in astrology. Now, Saturn in astrology, first thing off, it rules authority, restrictions, limitations, responsibilities, fears, the government ambition, and also structure and discipline. The sign Saturn is placed in a natal chart can show how Saturn's energy may be used, but when you look at it by house, it's more about where you might experience some limitations and difficulties, and perhaps even where you show seriousness and structure and discipline as well. Now, let's take somebody that has Saturn in Sagittarius in the fourth house in their natal chart. Now, this person might feel perhaps a certain responsibility for speaking the veritable truth in their home and in family life, matters pertaining to home and family. And but another thing about it, though, is now the person may also experience some limitations and restrictions in expressing optimism, exuberance, and enthusiasm, and even expansive energy in home-related matters, whether it's doing work in the home or home-related projects or what have you. And that side, this could be really also, when you look at this, it could also be difficulty in expressing a real happy and jocular side in home-related things, even traditions, and even really maybe even being happy with one's emotional security. So anyway, now also Saturn in the fourth could be about taking care of a debilitated parent, and there could be some sadness and despondency in the home and family life. Now, anyway, in general, as far as aspects go in a natal chart with Saturn, now, if it makes say predominantly positive aspects in a natal chart, well, the person may have much structure and discipline in life, and may even yield positive results that come out of hard work in industry, working laboriously, and really being able to take care of responsibilities very well. Now, if Saturn, let's say it makes predominantly adverse aspects in the natal chart and it's strongly afflicted, well, the person may be overly pessimistic, negative, despondent, might be a perpetual worrier, and encounter a lot of hardships, restrictions, and limitations in their life. The outlook may be rather negative, and anyway, because Saturn, when you look at Saturn in a chart, Saturn, is really a very strong harbinger of fear and worry and apprehension. If you have Saturn strongly afflicted, it makes predominantly negative or adverse aspects. The person can be a very strong worrier. Now, another thing, as far as this goes, now, it's also important to look at like specific and individual aspects with Saturn, as well as where you could have a blending, whether it's positive or negative, with other planets and points in the chart, depending on whether the aspect is positive or adverse. Now, let's say somebody has Saturn making an adverse aspect to Venus in their natal chart. Let's say Saturn makes a square, opposition, or even an inconjunct to their natal Venus. I have Saturn square Venus in my natal chart. Now, anyway, while the person may experience despondency in love, relationships, and they may also have difficulty expressing feelings in matters of the heart, and it could also be difficulty in expressing feelings, perhaps to really in showing that love, being demonstrative in matters connected with older people and say grandparents, for example. And as I stated before, I have Saturn square my Venus in my natal chart, and sadly, I love my grandparents that were on my mother's side, but sadly, I don't feel I love them nearly as much as they love me. And I really wonder if the Saturn square Venus might have had a little something to do with that, because if you have that aspect, I think it can show where you might have difficulty in expressing love toward older people, and that can include grandparents, of course. So anyway, also Saturn in adverse aspect to Venus. This could also be a person that might think he or she is not worthy of being loved. Now I'm going to talk about, let's say if somebody has Saturn retrograde in a natal chart. Now that could reflect somebody that may take on an inordinate amount of responsibilities because they simply feel or really may not be cognizant of limitations or restrictions that they have. And as a result, unfortunately, people with Saturn retrograde may suffer some kind of physical and or mental exhaustion because of this. And anyway, now another thing to talk about as far as Saturn goes, let's say that Saturn is intercepted in a natal chart. Well, this could show vacillation and distortion of energy. The person may really be very responsible and work laboriously 1 minute, 1 moment, and take care of responsibilities vigorously in 1 moment, and then the next minute they may become apathetic regarding these things and basically might become stagnant and not really take care of their responsibilities and maybe kind of throw the sweep them under the rug, so to speak. So anyway, another thing too is Saturn unaspected. If somebody has Saturn unaspected, which of course is rare in a natal chart, this could suggest that the person might feel a disconnect, perhaps from the father, from older people in general, and maybe even from authority figures. Saturn also unaspected also could indicate that the person, I mean, keep in mind that when you have an unaspected planet in a natal chart, the energy is often not working properly, and it's working in a way you don't really think it should be working. Now, let's say you have Saturn unaspected. Well, this could be somebody that might work hard perhaps on things that laboriously on things that may not have that much importance, that might not really, that others may see as somewhat insignificant or trivial. But when it comes to something of more significance, this same person may not really emphasize those things as much, and really such as responsibilities as opposed to things of maybe, for example, say hobbies or games or pleasure-seeking things. Responsibilities and things of more significance they may not put nearly as much effort and labor into. So anyway, now it's also important to look at transits by Saturn as well to your natal houses in your chart, because this could show perhaps at the time when Saturn is transiting a particular house, it could show where you might be experiencing some restriction, some limitation, but at the same time might be experiencing seriousness and structure and discipline in that particular sector of life. Now, let's say, for example, you have a transit Saturn in your natal 9th house. Now, this could be, you might feel at this time maybe some limitations or restrictions connected with higher education, traveling abroad, maybe even expressing abstract thinking and thinking outside the box. But at the same time, Saturn is connected with older people, so older people may figure more prominently in your philosophical outlook and other 9th house related matters. I mean, whether it's higher education or what have you. So now, transits by Saturn to natal points in your chart are significant as well. Now, let's say, for example, let's take transit Saturn making an adverse aspect to your natal moon. Let's say transit Saturn makes a square, opposition, or even an inconjunct to your natal moon. Well, this could be a time where you might feel overly pessimistic and feeling kind of down and just maybe seeing the negative element or aspect of things at the same time when this occurs. a divorce or some kind of separation between the parents is a little bit more likely at this time, because keep in mind that Saturn is connected with the father and the moon is associated with the mother. So anyway, and also responsibilities might conflict with your emotional needs, and those emotional needs, of course, dependent on whatever moon sign you may have. Now, anyway, another example, let's say that transit, well, let's talk about transits to one's natal Saturn may impact one's outlook connected with responsibilities, industry, limitations, and restrictions. Now, let's say, for example, you have transit Neptune making an adverse aspect to your natal Saturn. It makes a square opposition or even an inconjunct to it. Now, this could be a time where you might not really feel like taking on responsibilities or duties than you ordinarily would. You might just more or less fantasize about completing them rather than actually doing it. And as far as because this could really be about just being in fantasy land, so to speak, and not really actually taking action on those things that need to be done. And limitations and restrictions might be perhaps somewhat imagined in the mind at this particular time, and they might not actually be real, or you might simply be maybe distorting or exaggerating in your mind certain limitations that you may have. So anyway, also progressions by Saturn are significant as well. Let's say if you have your progressed Saturn in your 8th house, well, this could be a time where somebody may experience, in some cases, sexual inhibitions and limitations for a protracted period. And also, there may be more responsibilities connected with taking care of debts, such as credit card debt and even taxes that were unpaid. And I think let's say if you had Saturn, it was retrograde in the 8th house in the progress chart, this could be a continual maybe process of having to go back to payments from in the past that you needed to take care of, and you might have strongly procrastinated on. So anyway, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Saturn in astrology. Stay tuned next time, where I'll be talking about Uranus in astrology. 2 things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone. Because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.